So now we will discuss about the different types of heat and specifically the specific heat. So there is this concept called heat capacity. So heat capacity tells us that how much heat is to be given to any substance in order to increase its particular amount of temperature. So heat capacity is represented by S, and it is amount of heat given for increasing particular amount of temperature. So its unit is joule per Kelvin. Let's say we have two substances, substance A, substance B, and in substance A and substance B, one is water and one is sand, and both are 1 kg, let's say 1 liter 1 kg whatever, and let's say we give them both the same amount of energy. Let's say we give them both 100 joule of heat. So it will not be that both will have similar increase in the temperature. It may happen that the sand's temperature may increase by 20 degrees Celsius and water's temperature may only increase by 5 degrees Celsius. This, do not take this values literally, these are just for understanding. So what I'm trying to say is that water require more heat in order to increase its temperature as opposed to sand. So in some materials we need to apply very less heat to increase the temperature, and in other materials we need to apply very high or very large amount of heat to increase the temperature. So that is represented by this heat capacity. So first of all, let's discuss the types of heat capacity. The most important is the specific heat capacity. Specific heat capacity. So specific heat capacity is quite simple to understand. It is heat capacity per unit mass. Okay, so if we want to calculate the amount of heat required for 1 kg or 2 kg of object, so then we can divide it by mass and we will obtain specific heat capacity. Okay, heat capacity per unit mass. So we know that heat capacity is heat upon temperature, so it will be 1 over m into del q over del t. So the value of specific heat constant will be joule per kg per kilogram, per Kelvin. So from here del q will be ms del t. So this means, this is the main formula. The amount of heat needed to supply is equal to the mass and the change in the temperature and the specific heat constant. So it's quite simple. If you want to increase the temperature of a large mass, then obviously more heat will be required. If you increase the temperature by a lot, if you want to increase the temperature by a lot, so obviously more heat will be required. And if some material has high specific heat, that means it requires more time to heat, then obviously you will need more heat to be supplied. So this is quite simple to understand. Now similarly, just like specific heat capacity, we have another capacity called molar heat capacity. Molar heat capacity. So what is molar heat capacity? Molar heat capacity is the heat capacity per unit mole. Okay, this is number of moles. Sometimes it is represented by small and sometimes by mu. So molar heat capacity is the heat capacity per unit mole. So quite simple again, you will have mu here, so this value, so ultimately del q will be C mu del T. So this is the molar heat capacity constant, or you can just say molar heat capacity, and this was specific heat capacity constant or just specific heat capacity. By the way, the unit will be joule per mole per Kelvin, because unit of moles is mole. So for example, this graph is for water. So this is the graph between specific heat capacity and temperature. So it is not that specific heat capacity remains same for all the materials, it changes with temperature. So at 40 degrees Celsius the specific heat capacity of water is least. This means if the water is at 40 degrees Celsius, then it will be very easy to increase the temperature to, let's say, 45 degrees Celsius. But if the water is at 0 degrees Celsius, then it is very difficult to increase the temperature much. Okay, and again similarly, if it reach the 100 degrees Celsius and this all is at 180 atm, so again here the temperature will not be increasing that quickly. So this is the specific heat capacity graph for water. Now specific heat capacity is very important. It can be of two types. Now remember, we will be using C for both, although we are using S here, but we will be using C for specific heat capacity also. You can do one thing, for specific heat capacity you can use capital C, and for molar heat capacity you can use small c. So the specific heat capacity can be at constant pressure, it can be at constant volume. What does it mean? So there can be a situation in which we apply heat to any material and we apply heat in such a manner that the pressure does not change, and there can be a situation in which we apply heat to the material in such a manner that the volume does not change, the volume does not change. So when we apply heat and increase the temperature when pressure is constant, then it is called specific heat capacity at constant pressure. And if we apply heat when the volume is constant and try to increase the temperature, then it is called specific heat capacity at constant volume. Now here the work done will be 0, because we know that work done is equal to P del V. So if there is no change in the volume, no work will be done, and work done will not be 0 here because volume will be changing. Okay, so work done will be there. So now ultimately it is quite easy to understand that you will require more heat to increase the same amount of temperature when in the case of constant pressure as opposed to constant volume. Why? Because here the work is also done. The heat is given off to have two things. First is it can increase the internal energy, that is the temperature. Okay, this is the temperature, and it can also do some work. So in the case of the specific heat capacity or at constant pressure, this is the case. Heat is used for both internal energy increase and work done, but here heat is only used for increase in the internal energy, as the work done is 0. So all the heat is given given to increase the kinetic energy or temperature of the material. So it is obvious that Cp will be more than Cv. And if you want to have specific heat capacity per unit mole, so you can represent it using small Cp, small Cv, and Cp minus Cv is equal to R, which is a universal gas constant. So for ideal gases, Cp minus Cv is equal to R. Remember, these are molar specific heat capacities. Now we have some formulas. So as I told you that Q is U plus W. So specific heat capacity we studied earlier, that it will be del Q over del T, and mass is obviously mass is 1. Okay, so therefore the mass content is not here, mass is not here, otherwise mass would have been here. So at the place of del Q we can use internal energy plus work done. Okay, so similarly for constant pressure, but work done will not be here. So ultimately you can put it differently, so it will become like this. So you can clearly see Cp is more than Cv. Okay, and when you have the ratio of Cp over Cv, so this ratio has a name, it is called gamma. This ratio is called gamma. So the difference of molar heat capacities is R, and the ratio of the specific heat capacities is gamma. Now let's discuss about the Maxwell's distribution function. So the this graph tells us about the velocity of various substances, various particles, and the number of particles having that velocity. So this graph is for 3 different temperatures where T3 is highest. So let's say first discuss about T1. So at T1 temperature, this is the graph. It means that the particles having very low velocity and very high velocity, so the number of those particles is very less. Most of the particles have some velocity which is called the most probable velocity, and as we increase the temperature, this graph will shift towards right and it will move down. Okay, because this area needs to be same, because this area is telling us about the number of particles, so the number of particles is not changing. So this area needs to be same. So if temperature increase, then the most probable velocity will increase. So let's say here the most probable velocity was 2 meter per second, so here it will be 3 meter per second. Let's say here the most probable velocity becomes 5 meter per second, and so on. So as we increase the temperature, most probable velocity or the average velocities, all the velocities increase, and if they move ahead, then the graph has to move down. Then law of equipartition of energy. So this is quite important. This law tells us that at any temperature T, the energy is equally divided in all the three dimensions, all the three axes, x axis, y axis and z axis. So in all the directions the energy is equally parted. So for example, we have kinetic energy, translational kinetic energy. So translational kinetic energy will be equally divided into all three components, x, y and z. So we know that average kinetic energy is given by 3 by 2 kBt. So this means half kBt for x, half kBt for y and half kBt for z component. Similarly, kinetic energy can be average kinetic energy can be written like this. Now it is not that only translational kinetic energy is there. We have rotational as well as vibrational kinetic energies. So for rotational kinetic energy, this will be the formula. For vibrational kinetic energy, this will be the formula, having kinetic energy component and potential energy component. So the motion can be translational, rotational, vibrational. So in translational we will have kinetic energy, in rotational we will have kinetic energy, in vibrational we will have some kinetic energy and some potential energy. So ultimately the total energy will be due to translational, rotational and vibrational components, and in equilibrium total energy is equally distributed in all possible energy modes, with each mode having half kBt. Okay, so for each translational and rotational we have half kBt, and for each vibrational we will have 2 into half kBt, because one is for kinetic, one is for potential, so that is kBt. So this means this is kBt, this is kBt, this is half 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 kBt. So for translational and rotational each component will have half kBt, and for vibrational each component will have kBt. Sorry, this whole is kBt, this is only for y axis. Okay, this whole is kBt. For similarly for x we will have kBt, similarly for z we will have kBt, and here also half kBt for x, y and z. So now let's discuss about degree of freedom. So degree of freedom tells us that in how many orientation the particle can move and it will remain same. So the particle can be monoatomic, the particles can be diatomic, the particles can be polyatomic. So for example, helium gas is monoatomic, only one atom is there in helium, so it is a monoatomic gas. So in helium there are 3 degrees of freedom in translational motion, because you can rotate, you can move it in x direction, you can move it in y direction, you can move it in z direction. But what will happen if you rotate the helium atom? It is a sphere, remember. Okay, according to KTG and thermodynamics, molecules are atoms and molecules are spherical, so it will be a sphere. So however you rotate this, the molecule will look the same. So there is no degree of freedom in rotational motion, that is in rotational motion any way you move it will remain the same. And monoatomic also do not have any difference when they vibrate, they will look the same however they vibrate. So ultimately they have only 3 degrees of freedom in terms of translational motion. Now what about diatomic molecules? So diatomic molecules can have 2 situations, one is rigid and one is non-rigid. So let's say O2. Okay, so O2 is a diatomic molecule. So what happens if the distance between the molecules or distance between the 2 atoms remain constant? So let's say these are oxygen atoms and the distance is constant, like a rod, so it is rigid. But what happens if the distance of the molecules can increase or decrease. So this situation is like a spring. Okay, so this is non-rigid condition. So in rigid condition we will have 3 degrees of freedom of translation and 2 of rotation and no for vibration, because they will not vibrate. And in non-rigid we will have translational, we will have rotational. Again rotational, y2, remember y2, because if it is rotated on this axis nothing will change, but if you rotate on this axis or on the z axis, so it will look different. So because of that 2 orientations look different. And in non-rigid vibration will be there, because they can move towards each other, they can move away from each other, so they will look different. Okay, so there are total 7 degrees of freedom here. And in polyatomic molecules like H2O, CO2, so in them 3 for translational, obviously 3 for rotational, because in all 3 rotation along XYZ they will look different. And for vibrational it depends on okay, it is not fixed, it depends on the molecule. So ultimately specific, let's do the basic formulation. Specific heat capacity, so for monoatomic U is this much, which will be 3 by 2 RT, same thing. So CV will be 3 by 2 R, and we know that R is Cp minus Cv, so Cp will be 5 by 2 R. So ultimately remember, for monoatomic Cp is this, Cv is this, and gamma is Cp over Cv, so it will be 5 by 3. For rigid diatomic Cp and Cv are this and gamma is this. For non-rigid diatomic Cp, Cv and gamma. And for polyatomic Cp and Cv this, and their ratio is this. So for different degrees of freedom we will have different values of Cp and Cv, but notice Cp is more than Cp in all the cases. Cp is more than Cv in all the cases as expected. So in translational and rotational, Cp minus Cv is equal to R and U is equal to F by 2 RT or F by 2 kBt. And in vibrational, as I told you, it will be FRT or FKT. Okay, half kBt for this and kBt for vibrational. So specific heat capacity of a solid, vibrational component will in 1D will have only kBt, in 3D it will be 3 kBt. For 1 mole U will be 3 kBt or 3 RT, so C will be 3 R. So these are different situations. Now let's discuss about mean free path. So mean free path is the average path which the molecule or particle travel between 2 successive collisions. So when they move, they collide with particles. So the mean path between 2 successive collisions is mean free path. Let's say n is the number of molecules per unit volume, t is the time period between collisions. Number of collisions we do not know. D is the diameter of the molecule. Let's say the molecule is this much and its diameter is d. Now we know that volume can be found out by area into length, collision in time t can be found out like this. So ultimately we will have a formula which will tell us about the average distance between 2 successive collision or mean free path. So it will be 1 over root 2 n pi d square. N is number of molecules per unit volume, pi is pi, d is the diameter of the molecule. Also we can also find the relaxation time, which tells us about the time period between 2 collisions. So it will be 1 over n pi d square, average velocity. So number of molecules per unit volume, diameter of molecule, average velocity. So these formulas are important.